A reading from the Gospel of John. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give it to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. Chapter 14, verse 27.
Readings from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Sarva dharman pratijya mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva prapebhyo mokshisyami ma sukaha, which in English means, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Chapter 18, text 66. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana parayuppasate Tesam nityabhiyuktanam yoga sheman vahami aham, which in English means, but those who worship me with devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and preserve what they have. Chapter 9, text 22. Hare Krishna.
A reading from the Quran. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Did you suppose that those who would enter the garden without there having come to you the like of that which came to those who passed on before you? Misfortune and hardship befell them, and they were so shaken that the messenger and those who believed in him said, "When will God's help come?" Yea, surely God's help is near. Chapter 2, verse 214.
Not this Shabbat, but next is Shabbat Shirah, the Sabbath of song, when the Israelites finally escape the slavery of Egypt and stand safely on the far shore of the sea, and liberation opens before them, and they sing a song to God from Exodus 15. Oziv zimrat yah vehili lishua. You are the Lord, you the Lord are my arm, my strength and my song, and you are become my salvation. You are my God, and I will sing your praise. You are the God of my ancestors, and I will exalt you. If you would rise with me for the invocation, I hope the words appear back here, because they're not in your program. Built from a meditation on the Psalm 77 by Rabbi Harold Schulweis, when hope seems somehow distant, but we know it's there. When I cry, my voice trembles with fear. How can I greet the dawn with song when darkness eclipses the rising sun? Turn me around to yesterday, that I may be consoled by its memories. Did we not bless the bread that came forth from the heavens? Did your voice not reach my ears and direct my wanderings? The waters, the lightning, the thunder remind me of yesterday's triumphs. Let the past offer proof of tomorrow. Let it be my comforter and guarantor. We have been here before, known the fright, found your companionship. We enter your sanctuary again, to await the echo of your promise. Please be seated.
Aloha. I am grateful to our dean, Professor Ken Stone, for bringing my greetings during my travels to Hawaii. And so I bring you greetings remotely and am delighted to welcome you to the spring term of our academic year. Welcome. Welcome to those of you in the room and those of you joining via live stream. Welcome to our returning students, some of whom studied intensively in the J term and others who spent time on projects or with family. And welcome to our new students who are just beginning this journey. Welcome to our continuing and new staff members who work steadily to make sure we have a generative learning environment. Welcome to returning faculty members who taught classes or led CTS events during the J-term, faculty members who worked on various projects, and all faculty members who worked so hard to prepare for this term. Welcome to alums, and welcome to our trustees who are here with us today. And welcome to visitors. May each one of this gathered community have a productive and provocative semester. May our work be our worship of God. Opening Convocation is a formal tradition where we officially acknowledge the new and continuing aspects of our life. We honor the significance of our traditions with regalia, ceremony, and reaffirmation of our mission, vision, and commitments. Let us celebrate fully this ritualized moment, a chance at a fresh start, a chance to begin again, a chance to acknowledge the fullness our relationships with each other, a chance to focus on forming ourselves for greater justice and mercy, a chance to renew our focus on leading social change. Coming here is an act of intention. Let us live fully into it. May our work be our worship of God. Welcome to the official opening of the spring semester for Chicago Theological Seminary.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I welcome you to this convocation, and we too welcome our staff, our students, and faculty. We're happy to see faculty and students continue their work in this term. As trustees, we want you to know that each of you, our students, our staff, and our faculty are crucial to CTS. We continue to do our best to support you in the very difficult scholarship that you do together. Yes, some of you are just beginning your journey with us, and some are toward the end of your journey. Know that to all we have great faith in you. Now, today, I have to say this. There may be some who find it distracting, troubling, even depressing to focus on scholarly work in such a time as this. And yet, I believe your work in preparing yourselves could not be more important. I'd like you to think of a rowboat. If you've never been in one, imagine with me. As you row and pull at the oars, you're not looking in the direction that you're going. Rather, you're looking at where you have been, and you're guiding your forward movement by a fixed point in the past. However hard you row, there's an element of faith that you must have that by staying true to your core beliefs, that fixed point in the past, you'll eventually get to where you're trying to go and where you're called to go. So, with faith in God, courage in your heart, and wisdom in your soul, keep rowing.
My wife often says I have an iron stomach. She marvels at my ability to eat a number of different foods right after each other without getting sick. But as the results of our most recent presidential election continue to roll in, I was sick to my stomach. My wife was sick. Friends and colleagues reported their children throwing up and crying inconsolably. Shortly thereafter, during one of our WebEx sessions, with students spread across different parts of the country, many reported that same sick feeling. As I thought about where I wanted to begin this reflections, my thoughts immediately went to the familiar ideals of our beloved religious and spiritual traditions. I considered the go-to moral languages that shore up the common good, establish a baseline of human dignity, admonish the love of neighbor, envision the just society, to denounce the isms of oppression, to invoke our traditions of resistance and resilience. But I didn't want to start there. I'm here on behalf of the Spiritual Life Committee at CTS. So I wanted to begin with that feeling that's in the pit of the stomach, the foreboding in the soul, and the concrete fears born from the wisdom of history. That's the evidence that powerful forces have been unleashed in this nation. This sickness is not new, but to quote theologian and ethicist Emily Towns, to see white nationalism and racial dominance sashaying around with forgetfulness and masquerading as truthfulness has many of us concerned for our well-being of ourselves, friends and family, and communities we love and care for. But I find myself heartened, sustained, encouraged by the spirit of resistance and resolve, moving among people who are not activists, advocates, or ministers by profession, but who are now energized. I'm encouraged by the sense of possibility in those who have labored for years, now facing throngs of people asking, what can we do? The Spiritual Life Committee wants to acknowledge both the promise and peril of this time and provide a space of reflection in each of our chapel services for this semester. Reverend Lisa Goods will work with the planning teams to find the right space within each service for this reflection. In addition, we will provide resources to organize around the multiple threats that communities are facing, as well as resources to care for your body, mind, and soul. We cannot sustain this work if we are not well. The mission, vision, and commitments of our institution were meant for such a time as this. Thank you.
Aloha again. I'm not in Hawaii, but if I had to imagine myself being somewhere other than CTS Convocation, that would be okay. A convocation is literally a gathering or assembly, and at CTS we gather several times a year to recognize publicly that part of our life together which is devoted to learning, teaching, research, and writing. We do so today having just learned that a longtime partner and instructor, Rabbi Herman Shaman, passed away yesterday at the age of 100. Rabbi Shaman taught at CTS on multiple occasions, both alone and together with Emeritus Professor Dr. Andre Lecoq. But he was also quite active beyond CTS. He served as rabbi and then rabbi emeritus at Emmanuel Congregation on Chicago's far north side. In addition to teaching at CTS, he has taught at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary and the Catholic Theological Union. He served as president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs. Our Rabbi Herman Shaman Chair in Jewish Studies, currently held by Professor Rachel Mikva, is of course named in honor of Rabbi Shaman. And significantly, he played a key role with the late Cardinal Joseph Bernardine in founding the Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago. He was highly regarded for his interreligious work in Chicago and beyond, and it is clear to me that we will need more religious leaders like him in the coming months. We also note today the absence of several colleagues who are away on sabbatical, including Dr. Alice Hunt, President and Associate Professor of Biblical Hermeneutics and Religious Leadership, Dr. Julia Speller, Kenneth B. Smith Professor of Public Ministry and Associate Professor of American Religious History and Culture, and Dr. Sing-A Yang, Associate Professor of New Testament. But we are pleased to welcome back to CTS other members of our community. Our alumna, Reverend Lisa Seiwert, has rejoined us this week as Project Director for the CTS Interreligious Institute, or IRI. In that capacity, she will report to Acting President Donald Clark, while also working closely with faculty and senior administration to fill out the vision, map implementation plans, build relationships, and raise funds to secure the future of IRI. We're excited to have Lisa back with us, and we are excited about the ongoing work in interreligious engagement that she will help us facilitate. And finally, we are pleased to welcome back from sabbatical today's convocation speaker. Dr. Myung Seo is our Associate Professor of Theology and Cultural Criticism. He earned his BA from Drew University, his MA from the University of Chicago, and his MDiv and PhD here at Chicago Theological Seminary. He joined the faculty as assistant professor in 2000, and in addition to teaching several required courses, he has been teaching in the areas of cultural analysis, philosophy and theology, Confucianism and other Asian religions, and the history of Christian thought. In addition to writing multiple articles and essays, Professor Seo is the author of the books A Critique of Western Theological Anthropology, which is based on his CTS dissertation, and a book published in Korean, The End of the University, The Status of Higher Education in Contemporary Capitalism. As these titles indicate, Professor Seo has a wide range of interests in education and the humanities, and we look forward to his address this morning on the topic, Some Thoughts on Theology in the Post-Human Age.
Thank you so much, Dean Stone, for that introduction. On occasion such as this, coming back from a sabbatical, rejoining the faculty and the community provides an opportunity to reflect not just on what one has done during the sabbatical, but on the larger question of vocation, and even bigger question of where we are as a community of learners. I am aware, however, that there is a pressing, urgent concern that is troubling not just the people of this community, but great many people of this country and of the entire world. And I am certainly referring to what's been happening in this country since the new administration came into office. It is hard to find a right word to describe what I am feeling these days, as Professor Ringer eloquently reminded us. Particularly myself, as someone who came into this country as an immigrant. Hard to find the right word to describe what I'm feeling at the seeming madness, unreason, that's escalating at an apocalyptic proportion, it seems to me. Reading the text of the new president's inauguration speech, and later reading about what his executive orders transpired in the last few days, I thought it would be unconscionable for me not to speak about it somehow in my address today. The fact is, in all my years living in this country, I have never felt so fragile, worried, and upset because of a federal administration. The title of my address could not be changed. So I thought about how I can make President Donald Trump into a post-human figure, or his administration as a manifestation of post-human reality. But unfortunately, it did not quite work. So in essence, you will hear two speeches from me. My thoughts about President Trump, and given the nature of this address, I will try one idea on top of my thoughts and see if it works. And then I will get to my thoughts on the post-human age, a shorter version of it anyway. I frankly have not paid much attention to the last presidential election. Not that I had great interest in presidential politics anyway, but I lost it rather entirely when I heard the current president, Donald Trump, was in the Republican race, and that he was winning. My initial reaction was, say it ain't so. Like many of you, I'm sure, I thought he would just go away. Or the good people of this country would make him go away and let him do what he does best. That is, being an outrageous personality on television. I did not believe when people told me that he was about to win the nomination. I refused at first to believe that the conservative Republicans would nominate Donald Trump, the same Donald Trump who headlined tabloid weekly magazines for so long with crazy stories, to be their president. I refuse to believe that people who claim to have conservative American values would elect somebody whose moral compass seemed to indicate only two directions: egotism and profiteering. But I was wrong. And when I heard the news that he had won the election one afternoon in Korea, I felt chills running down my spine. And walking down the street in Seoul, I literally felt my legs were shaking. I went online and read something Paul Krugman of the New York Times wrote the morning of the election, an apology of sort, saying that he just did not know America as much as he had thought. I too began to think what it was about America that elected Trump as its president. Given the fact that I had been thinking and writing about apocalyptic thinking as part of the American ethos running through its history and thought, the idea of Donald Trump as an apocalyptic figure came to mind, and his election as president as an apocalyptic decision. It is said that there are about 50 million people in this country whose worldview is by and large apocalyptic, waiting for the signs of the end, waiting for Armageddon to take place, waiting for Jesus' return, and waiting for sudden disappearance into the sky. Such an apocalyptic view is an important part of the 20th century Christian fundamentalism in this country. But it also has a much longer history that goes back to the Puritans and to the 19th century premillennialism, and it continues to this day. But that's another story. What was notable to me about the apocalyptic decision of last November was that Trump received 81% of the votes of evangelical Christians, the heirs of Christian fundamentalism. 81% was more than what anybody before Trump received as president. I did not expect a Lincoln speech or an Obama speech during his inauguration. But surely, given the long and venerable tradition of presidential inaugural speeches, I thought that he would, for once at least, offer a sincere, open-minded speech to try to unite people, or at least to pay an obligatory homage to American history and to its aspiration and idealism. But the speech had none of it. It sounded to me like a declaration, not of peace and goodwill to the world, but of war and final victory. Was I the only one to have seen that he's been acting on his declaration of war through his executive orders? His inauguration speech was full of apocalyptic tone and rhetoric. In the speech, he no longer saw the need to rely on the rhetoric of freedom to enclose America in a mythic aura. He had no use for the Puritan sense of chosenness. He paid no homage to the American role in peace and justice in the world. Nor did it remind people about what America means in relationship to the sanctity of individual liberty. He had no use for American exceptionalism anymore. But he did make a call to America, a call to patriotism. He said America will be protected by its police and by the military. He said a new millennium was upon us and that he wanted to make America victorious. And he issued a moral code, America first. If you put the ideas of America first and the idea of the dawning of a new millennium together, you get something like a millennial eschatology. It seems like President Trump is replacing the ideas of America being on a mission and the idea of American exceptionalism with an apocalypse, with an apocalyptic immediacy. For him, there is no need for an American exceptionalism that says we are different and better. He had no need to present America as being endowed with special mission. For him, there is no need anymore to talk, because for him, now is the time to act. Act through orders. Donald Trump, to me, is an apocalyptic figure who speaks no religious language. He's an apocalyptic figure who caters to the desires of the millenarian believers who believe that the end will come sooner than later. He speaks the language of violence and dualism, the dualism of American goodness and foreign terrorism. Dualism which has to be maintained through a war. While he has a dualistic vision, he himself is beyond good and evil. He does not pretend to be a messianic figure, just somebody who proclaims that we are living in a now or never kind of situation. He's armed with certainty that is so certain that it requires no explanation. Being so certain, he is not afraid of war, and he believes that violence has its just place. Apocalyptic movements have a tendency to disappear in time and with time. But how long can we wait? That's the question. In this apocalyptic time, I stand with immigrants of this country and with immigrants in all of us. To refuse the orders, to defy the orders. Being in Korea recently, where I had witnessed another political turmoil and mass protests against the sitting president and through the impeachment proceedings, I learned the value of standing together by being there, the value of marching together, and the value of shouting together. And I believe that this is exactly what was needed in Korea and what's needed in our country, and indeed what is happening today in this country. Perhaps it is possible, after all, to present President Trump as a post-humanistic figure, to the extent that he is trying to dismantle the edifice of humanism, such as openness and tolerance. If not post-human, perhaps he can indeed be presented as an anti-human or anti-humanistic figure. Coming back to my originally scripted speech, in which I wanted to say some things about post-human age, post-humanism, take your pick. I do not know exactly when the word post-human came into my consciousness, but I knew the term was used in science fictions, and that it gradually became more popular with advancements in artificial intelligence, and that it became finally a fixture in our lexicon as people began to imagine various forms of human demise, both physical and literary. But I've been resisting the temptation to read more than what came to me accidentally. Even as the discourse on post-humanism was growing all around me, representing different communities and disciplines of academic inquiry. At the same time, I've been hearing claims that science and technology are making post-human age a reality, making the 18th century image of human machine more than a product of imagination. My talk would be, I'm trying to be brief and therefore deal with certain basics. I say, the title says, some thoughts. I am not about to present a theology of post-humanism, but some basic ideas that I have that's been with me. Let me talk about my resistance, or at least hesitation, concerning the idea of post-humanism. I initially tried to dismiss the idea of post-humanism or the post-human as another post-something to describe and to explain who we are and where we are. It felt like this. Just when I became sick of the excess and pretensions of postmodernism, people are trying to try their luck with another post something. I dismissed and still do dismiss many claims associated with transhumanism as ideological attempts to perpetrate Enlightenment ideas of progress. When people started to speak about post-humanism as a critical theory on contemporary capitalism, I thought that it's merely another form of postmodernism, having taken on another phase. I still do think that in terms of the history of critical discourse in recent decades, there's a historical linkage between postmodernism and posthumanism. One, that is, postmodernism came at about the time when industrial capitalism was going away, and financial capitalism was coming in as the reigning doctrine. And the other, posthumanism, as a critical discourse, gained momentum with the realization that the neoliberal regime of financial capitalism was untenable, and that capitalism in its current form cannot sustain human life, or any life for that matter, in this world. Hence, we have the famous question of whether capitalism can reform itself before humanity becomes extinct. Parenthetically, the relationship between posthumanism and postmodernism also raises a question of why and how a certain discourse comes to become a dominant explanation and description for a particular age, and how in time such discourse no longer becomes a viable answer. And what postmodernism made us do, such as reading strange stuff, remember, posthumanism in recent years is making us do the same, and I would say more. In the 1970s, postmodernism was initially presented as a reflection on the new condition of knowledge, and it asked us to revisit, first and foremost, the very modern notion of how we know. Posthumanism, on the other hand, is making us revisit not just the question of how we know today, but also the question of how we live. It is asking us to think about not just the condition of knowledge today, but the condition of knowledge, condition of life today. Let me go back to my hesitation. I think my real hesitation about posthumanism came from my sort of nostalgic attachment to humanism. Posthumanism as a critical discourse hinges upon its critique of humanism as an ideology perpetuating a human-centered or anthropocentric perception of the world, which have resulted in mistreatment of non-humans, animals, and nature. This critique also understands humanism as a domineering, oppressive, and as being steeped in dualistic conceptions of things. What is being interrogated by posthumanism is the idea that human beings are special and unique, and therefore are to be given special rights and freedom over non-human entities. The criticism of humanism as being dualistic is easy enough to describe and explain. That it hinges upon a dualism of humans and nature, humans and animals, always hierarchically conceived. But this dualism does not stop there, as it goes on to make another set of hierarchical distinctions, divisions, even within the human realms. Self and other, mind and body, male and female, the West and the non-West, whites and non-whites. So, as the argument goes, according to post-humanism, it is time to declare the end of humanism. And about this, I have no issues. My issue is that I agree with what is being described as the effects, but not the cause. It is said that the post-humanism of cyborgs, in short, can open up a more liberative, non-hierarchical future against the ills of capitalism and humanism. But I think, in short, this view makes too much assumptions about cyborgs and too little assumptions about capitalism. My nostalgia-driven view about humanism is that there's a lot more to humanism than has been criticized for. I say this fully understanding that many humanist projects in modernity were limited in scope, fully knowing how they were co-opted by modern forms of ideologies, including modern liberalism and capitalism, leading to a distorted vision of the earth and nature. Here I also want to remember that post-humanism did not invent the criticism of humanism. Already in 1940s, Martin Heidegger criticized humanism as an indication of what is wrong with the Western thought. Heidegger thought that he was being critical of humanism when it said that its essence is theological, which is what he means by the term ontotheology. I believe, parenthetically, that humanism in the West is a byproduct of theology. But I would even go even further and say that humanism is a theological achievement. In fact, criticism of humanism was one constant theme in the development of ideas in Europe since the 50s, since the heydays of existentialism. I would even argue that everything that came afterwards, structuralism, post-structuralism, postmodernism, and even the developments within psychoanalysis was, in one form or another, a criticism of humanism. In my skeptical view of this criticism of humanism, I would name, only parenthetically, the name of Emmanuel Levinas, who in 1960s, during later years of the 1960s, joined the discussion that was going on in France, in Europe at that time, about humanism and anti-humanism. He joined in and said that the demise of humanism one has to be cautious about, because I think it is right. He was right that criticisms of humanism was short-sighted in not understanding the full implication of what humanism can intend and can mean. And I can certainly think of Levinas's understanding of the other, the humanism of the other, as a philosophical attempt to counter the critique of humanism. My humanism, if I can call it that, however, is more than a Western one, as it has been formed by the Confucian sensibilities toward being human, toward the idea of how we become human. My view is that being human is not a right or privilege or gift given to me just because I was born human. To me, being human means to be given an awful lot of responsibility. By responsibility, I do not mean a theological responsibility for others or to care for the rest of God's creation, but a responsibility to think about the good that being human is ought to be about, and cultivate one's humanity so that one can achieve that goodness. Whatever that goodness is, it can only be your good as you grow into it through your engagement with the world. This is part of my, let's say, Confucian humanism. But even with these reservations, I obliged when I was asked to contribute something to the discussion of post-humanism during my sabbatical. As I began to read and think about the issues in a way that I have not done before, it soon became apparent that the theological issues were not ordinary. It became apparent that post-humanism, or the idea of the post-human, demands that we not only revisit old theological questions, but also invent new ones, such as the possibility of God without humanity, such as the possibility of God of the cyborgs and machines. And certainly one theological idea that demands most attention is, needless to say, theological anthropology. Just about everything we have thought about the relationship between God and humanity, whether it's in terms of sin, freedom, language, or rationality, it has to undergo some radical thinking. Now, I want to take a step back and say that terms like post-human or post-humanism are difficult to define precisely, and people use them rather differently. I quickly discovered that there are at least 3 different usages of the term post-human, each representing a unique development in relationship to post-human. First is something that's often known as transhumanism. It's an optimistic view of the post-human future as one in which humans' biological limitations will be overcome. So transhumanists believe that thanks to biotechnology and artificial intelligence, we will be more or less liberated from the diseases and even the usual certainty of death. It has become something like a religion with cultish following these days, often associated with the metaphor of downloading our brain onto a computer. Secondly, there are people who understand post-humanism to represent an ill-conceived attempt to enter a brave new world of ethically uncharted territory. This perspective is worried that an unchallenged post-human future of biotechnology will portend the end of humanity as we have come to know it. Thirdly, there are those who advocate post-humanism as an end of humanism, as I spoke about earlier, sometimes referred to as critical post-humanism. It is a view that understands the post-human thought as a critical theory against contemporary ills of society, ills of human-centered views and systems, including modern capitalism. My view about these 3 perspectives is that none of them can be taken lightly, since they all deal with serious and legitimate issues. Surely I don't like to think about the transhuman future of spiritual machines or cyborgs, but I don't have enough knowledge to say that something like that is on the way and that that is not the future. Because it is hard to deny that we are already living in a cyborg age of implantation and machine-assisted life. And the moral questions about the post-human future of biotechnology and genetic engineering and physical enhancement are real questions, asking us about what it means to be a human being, and more importantly, what makes us human. And regarding critical post-humanism, I think its critique of anthropocentrism of humanism and the capitalist exploitation of nature is, despite my questions, more than legitimate. One sort of preliminary theological understanding, a rudimentary understanding of the post-human from a theological perspective is to say that post-human we always knew about. It is easy to think that post-human is a concept which came about only through contemporary science and technology. But we should actually think of it as having a long history of development in the Western tradition. This history is one that I would like to refer to as the history of waiting for the overcoming of the human. The idea of post-humanity, then, is only a contemporary manifestation in that history. In this history, this waiting has often been represented as the search for transcendence. We can find such will to transcendence in trying to wrestle with God, in trying to build a tower, or in waiting for the advent of an overman, a la Nietzsche, or trying to achieve human perfection through machines. Another way of characterizing this history is that it has not accepted human beings as they are. Human being is one who struggles between fate and accident, between freedom and bondage. This has resulted in the consciousness of sin. It was the role of doctrines to deliver people from sin. But when the doctrine becomes the tool of oppression, this liberation gets expressed as the desire to become God, a desire that was well expressed in the Renaissance claim that human beings can replace God. So this history has two characteristics that desires the overcoming of the human and related theme of not accepting human beings as who they are. Now let me try to conclude with some thoughts about where theological responses to post-humanism has been. Theologians have responded to post-humanism as transhumanism. A lot of them have responded. Theologians have responded to critical post-humanism. My take on it is that some theological responses is too little, some too much. Some argue that because transhumanism has limitations, it is theological duty to critique its shortcomings and reassert doctrines. And some theological attempts have been just to understand post-humanism as another theological move that we can make. And I think truth that we should seek lies somewhere in between. Okay? In part because if anything that I have read is true, post-humanism is not going to go away. And trying to revisit our old theological questions, revisiting the traditional answers to those questions is something that we must engage. I do not know if post-humanism is going to be as big as postmodernism, but I surely think that it'll have a lasting impact and lasting legacy. Okay. I would like to end by thanking the community. I began the speech with my reflection on Donald Trump. Had I known, I should have known that communities such as this have dealt with the contemporary issues in this country seriously and deeply. I have been away for most of my sabbaticals, away from this country, and I felt a bit isolated, and I felt that the America that I would return to, what kind of country I would find in this current regime. I had my anxieties and worries. And I'd like to let you know how comforting the last few days have been to find myself in the midst of your presence, deeply engaged, deeply concerned with the questions of the day. And it is certainly good to be home. Thank you.
Hang on to the world as it spins around. Just don't let the spinning get you down, get you down. Things are moving fast. Hold on tight and you will last. Keep your self-respect and all of your manly and womanly pride. Get yourself in gear. Keep your stride. And don't ever mind your fears. Brighter days will soon be here. Take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Keep on walking tall. high. Lay your dreams right up to the sky. Go ahead and sing your songs, and you'll keep going and growing and going on. Take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Just wait and see. Someday we'll all be free. You gotta believe me, take it from me, someday we'll all be free.
Let us pray. Holy One, you of many names and beyond all names, you with many faces and no face at all, attend us now. Your children are praying. We have gathered today as we do each term to convoke, to speak together, to honor the varied callings to which we have been called. Prosper the work of our hands, our minds, our hearts. Prosper our work to your glory and praise as contributions to the increase of your mercy, your peace, your justice. As spring 2017 begins, we are hopeful, we are committed, we are engaged in your good work, but we are also in such a time as this, as Esther was, confronted with contradiction and doubt. This is a time when shadows grow long and lights to guide us flicker dimly, when the greedy rampage and the vulnerable cringe, when evil seems to prosper while the innocent are crushed. We are bewildered. Direct us. We are demoralized. Empower us. We are unsure. Illumine us. So too, we are fearful for our neighbors, for refugees and immigrants, for First Nations communities, for all people of color, for women and sexual minorities, for the poor, for ourselves. Console us. Soak us in your promised peace. Untrouble our hearts. And we are fearful of the pollution of sacred lands, of all lands and all waters, of the unleashing of industry to rampage the earth, of the evisceration of public education, of the substitution of conflict for cooperation with neighboring nations, both ally and enemy, of the elevation of personal interest over national interest, of corporate profit over the common good, of the precedence of alternative facts over common sense, of the silencing of the Fourth Estate, of the demeaning of those who protest or criticize. As such clouds of the present eclipse the rays of tomorrow, turn us around to yesterday. You split the sea so slaves could make the long march to freedom on dry land. You gave bread from heaven in a barren wilderness. You lead us still. You nourish us still, so that still we may arrive at that place for which our parents sighed. We have been here before and known the fright, but we also know we can depend on your companionship. Attend us, assure us, empower us. And beyond all this, we and those we love are ill. We mourn. We are surrounded by grief. So many have died, so many are dying. Hear our cries, send consolation. In and beyond our nation, even in our own neighborhoods, even in some of our own homes, there is hunger. There is inadequate heat and substandard housing, dirty water, poisonous air. There are wars and rumors of wars. There are fires and floods, earthquakes and droughts. Be for us shelter in storm. Become our salvation. In all these ways, in the face of all these troubles, turn us around to yesterday, that we may have hope for tomorrow. We know the fright. Be once more and again our companion. Stir us up. Pour out upon us a spirit of courage. Lead us still, even if the road be stony. And we will be your people, and we will be about your work, doing justice, loving kindness, walking in humility. We ask all this even as we also and already give you thanks and praise for bringing us through, for holding us up, for leading us on. Even as we thank you now as we prepare to leave this place and join in a meal, we bless you for bread of earth and cup of vine. We thank you for nourishing us with bounty from soil and sea, for a meal that, like every meal, entails the work of many hands and the suffering of many forms of life. Through the eating and through fellowship, strengthen us for your service, even as we remember those who know lack, those for whom we are called to provide both food and fellowship. In these days, in such times, as darkness delays the dawn and clouds eclipse the rays of tomorrow, we turn to you, you of many names and beyond all names. Attend us, assure us, empower us, for we are we not, the very ones whom we've been waiting for? We are already endowed with light, your light, the light of truth and justice and hope and mercy and compassion and love. And this light, your light, our light, my little light, must shine. This little light of mine